여러분 식사 맛있게 하셨어요? 식사 맛있게 안 하신 분 누구시죠? 네, 혹시 식사를 하셨는데도 배가 고프신 분? 까지 아주 다양한 이야기가 펼쳐질 예정입니다. 숲길의 성공적인 운영을 위한 협력의 중요성도 이 시간을 통해서 공부를 해보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 첫 번째 발표자는 아시아 산림 협력기구 아포코 팜덕치엔 박사님이십니다. 아포코는 아시아 지역의 산림 복원과 보존을 위한 순서가 바뀌었어요? 아, 네, 순서가 바뀌었답니다. 그러면 그래서 올라오셨었구나. 네, 순서가 바뀌어서 팜덕치엔 박사님은 뒤에 하시고요. 브랜디 홀튼 선생님부터 하실 텐데 레일즈 투 트레일즈의 브랜디 홀튼 선생님이신데요. 이 레일즈 투 트레일즈는 폐철도를 활용해서 트레일을 개발하는 운동을 주로 하고 있고요. 다양한 협력 관계를 통해서 미국 전역에 4만 2천 마일 이상의 트레일 네트워크를 구축했습니다. 오늘 발표에서 협력과 파트너십이 어떻게 긍정적인 사회적 변화를 이끌어냈는지에 대해서 설명해 주실 예정입니다. 이 발표를 통해서 트레일이 지역사회와 협력하는 방법, 우리에게도 큰 배움이 될 시간 같습니다. 브랜디 홀튼 선생님 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주세요.
Thank you very much. And let's see if we can get the slides working. Wonderful. So I just want to quickly open to thank everyone here, the Asian Trails Network, the people of Goryeo County, the Korean Forest Service for welcoming me and the story of America's rail trail movement to your event today. I have listened this morning, and the theme of the conference that keeps emerging, the conversations that we are having about public-private partnerships, they are critically important. I'm going to share a little bit about how our country created over 41,000 miles of multi-use trails all across America. And really the work to create, connect, and maintain trails is more impactful when it happens in partnership. And that's because people see themselves in the infrastructure that is being built when they are a part of the work to create it. So as I tell this story today, I hope that the power of people to take an idea and turn it into a movement for safe walking and biking sparks ideas for everyone here to take home with them. I also wanted to answer a question that had come up earlier about how organizations that are not government organizations get funded. And I thought Brenda did a fantastic job answering for her partners. And we're a little bit different. We don't really get any money from the federal government for our organization. The majority, almost 90% of all of our funding comes from regular people. So folks who maybe are just average Americans. They'll donate about $18 a year to be a member of our organization. That is half of our $13 million a year budget. The rest of the money comes from people who are wealthy, so philanthropists, folks who want to give money to causes that they believe in, foundations, corporate partners. The federal money we help channel into projects on the ground that get built. So it's just an interesting concept. So all right, let's take it away and see how the slides move. Or don't. There we go. Oh, one more time. I hear it. Yeah? Okay, the down button. Yeah, got it, no problem. Thank you. Figured out. Oh, you're going to move me. Okay. Very good. Okay, so the mission of our organization, we're about 40 years old, we turn 40 in the year 2026, is to build a nation that is connected by trails, reimagining public spaces so that everyone has places where they can safely walk, bike, and be active outdoors. And that's really important in the US because the majority of infrastructure that's built for people to get around the United States of America is built for cars, not even built for public transit. It's mostly invested in highways, in roads, in bridges. And that means that we have a problem in our country where people don't move as much as they should. They don't move their bodies as much as they should. So this vision originated with using rail corridors. And as I mentioned, we now have over 41,000 miles of multi-use trails. 25,000 miles of that are actually rail trails in our country. You can't take an old railroad and put it where you wanted to put it. So now our focus has evolved a bit to also include other public rights of way. So that could be utility corridors, that could be canal. We have a lot of canal irrigation systems in our country, so it would be canal infrastructure. It could be actually road right-of-way. In some states, we have places where what the state owns and that road right-of-way is really large, and so you could actually put safe, separated walking and biking facilities in that infrastructure. Our strategy as an organization, and we have to have a strategy because we need to get people to believe in us. We need the public to believe in us. We need politicians to believe in us. We need leaders at agencies like Brenda's to believe in us and to say, okay, we think this is the right investment to make. This is how we're going to achieve the goals of our place or our community. So our work is broken into 4 big buckets. The first is around infrastructure. So we need to actually create the trails, right, so that people can access them, they can use them, they can understand kind of how this maybe has an impact on their life or on their community. Our focus is both on converting those rail corridors into trails, converting those other multi-use and rights-of-way into trails, and then also thinking about how those trails connect to each other, how they connect to the places where people live, and how they connect to the places where people want to go. Because when you start to build that connectivity, the trail becomes that much more powerful as a resource and an asset to people in their daily lives. We also talk about investment. That is kind of our umbrella for advocacy, for reaching out to the government. It's really all about that funding, not funding in us as an organization, but funding in the infrastructure that needs to be built. So we do a ton of work with local government, with state government, with federal government to encourage them to prioritize funding multi-use trail infrastructure. That is what we need in order to get this done, because there's private investment, but the majority of investment in getting trails built is done by the federal, state, and local level. And we'll talk in a little bit about how much it takes to get all of those folks to agree that that is where they might want to put their money. So we do a lot of work in that advocacy space as well as in that infrastructure space. Our third bucket is what we reference in America as equity, the idea that everyone deserves access to this infrastructure. There's some great talks coming up about what it means to really represent people in these spaces and also make it accessible. So for us, when we're talking about equity, we're thinking about where and how are the trails built? Do they go to places that otherwise might have been underinvested in that don't have this infrastructure? Are they connecting communities that need that access? Are they accessible? Are they made from the right surface? Are there entry points where people can actually use them? On the investment side, making sure that that funding is going to communities that otherwise would not have those resources. There's lots of really wealthy places in America, and there's a lot of places in the US that are not wealthy. And so making sure that we are working with our federal partners and our state partners and our local partners to help kind of with that disparity and get the funding that exists to the places that need it the most. And it also is very important to participation, which is our fourth pillar, and that you can build this and you can fund it, but we really need people using it so that we can get more. And I've been so inspired by the conversations I've heard about the research into participation and the research into kind of public perception on this issue. So for us in the US, we know a lot of people will use it when you build it. They see their neighbors or their friends using it. There's a lot of people who won't. Maybe they don't know about it. Maybe they don't see people like them out on the trail. Maybe they think it's not a space for them. So we do a lot of work to create programming, to support programming among our partners that is culturally relevant to the communities that we're serving, that is really going to help get people out on the trail. We have 3 big initiatives that we work on that are a part of doing this and making this happen. So all of those strategic priorities are reflected in all of our work, but we've got these 3 kind of big buckets to carry them forward. One is called TrailLink. It is an actual app. It's on your phone. You can get it on your computer that maps out every single multi-use trail in the US and lets you access maps, lets you access information and user reviews from people about what they liked, what they didn't like, things that you might want to know about where the trail might go, where it takes you. Those user reviews are really important. That has been an incredible tool. We have reached over 90 million people in 20 years with maps and information about multi-use trails. So getting people into the movement, also getting people out on the trails. TrailLink has been a powerful tool for that. We're going to talk at length about the Great American Rail Trail in a few slides, but that is Rails to Trails Conservancy's initiative to connect the United States of America by trail. So we are working on a trail that goes from probably very much like the East-West Trail from Washington, D.C. on the East Coast to Washington State on the West Coast. And it has been a big vision of the organization for a very long time. It will be the longest multi-use trail in the United States of America. And then Trail Nation is our initiative to actually focus on the connectivity, how we connect trails into trail systems that serve people and places in different ways. So multi-use trails, I keep throwing that word around. Rail trail, I think there's some familiarity here with what a rail trail is. I wanted to break down just a little bit these different types of infrastructure that fall under our umbrella, which is a little bit different than the National Scenic Trails and the long distance trails and the historic trails that you just heard about. And on the rail trail side, it very much is what it says. It is a former rail corridor that is turned into a trail. To be clear, we love trains at Rails to Trails Conservancy. We love railroads. We think public transit is critically important to the success of mobility in our country. But there's a lot of places where rail corridors were built that are no longer needed. So that's because people move goods and freight around the country now using highways and trucks in a different way. That's a big piece of it. And so how do we make sure we hold on to and protect those corridors? They can have a whole nother life as a multi-use trail. Rail with trails, that is basically you might have a right-of-way that's big enough where there's still active train, but you want to make that connection between maybe a trail segment and a trail segment, and you can actually create a rail with trail connection. It is something that we work on quite a bit with our transit and railroad partners. It is really important for their liability. It gets human beings off the railroad tracks, which is important because people will walk where there's the least amount of resistance, and if there's no trail and there's a railroad track, they'll walk on it. So it helps that side of it. And then it's also really good for that connectivity piece. And then greenways. These might have a little bit of a different experience than the rail trail. They might go uphill a little bit more. They might be a little bit more hilly. But they have the same similar multi-use aspect of being a hard surface, typically pretty accessible for people in wheelchairs or pushing strollers, anything on wheels that isn't motorized, bike, rollerblades, etc. And again, that's an important part of that connectivity puzzle because you can't just put the railroad anywhere. And so these multi-use trails are super important because we have in the country equestrian trails that are meant for horses. We have mountain bike trails that are very much, in places that are super fun and super adventurous, but not really accessible to everyone. We have hiking trails. These are spaces where you can walk, you can run, you can bike, you can roll. You just can't do motorized activities. And like Brenda said earlier, with some exceptions, of course. And I will say there are a few local references that for folks who might kind of be familiar with these places. Actually, right here in Seoul, the Jiangwei Line Forest, that is a rail trail. It was a former railroad that went underground. So the rail corridor is still active, it's just underground. And that created space for this incredible, I have not been there, but I've seen the pictures and I've read about it, incredible public greenway and linear park that I think captures the best of the potential that exists for rail trails all around the world. You have amenities, you have places people want to go, you have tourism, you have economic development, you have an asset for the people who live right there and an asset for the people who want to come and visit and access nature close to that space. And another really great example that I found was the former railway that connected Singapore and Malaysia. It's the Green Corridor. And what I love about that so much is very much like in the US, where we have to think about how trails connect across state lines, and you have different decision makers involved in that. Being able to protect that rail corridor between Malaysia and Singapore kind of addresses the same challenge of if one side wants it and one side doesn't, you kind of lose the aspect and the continuity of that corridor. So it's a really interesting, I think, challenge to consider as you look at ways you can build either rail trails or multi-use trails in your areas. So a little bit about the origins of the movement and where this came from. It has often been said that, and I heard a little bit earlier today about the importance of history and the importance of spirituality in all of the work that is happening in Asia around trails. And in the US, we've talked about trails as a gift from the past that brings together the present and the future. Because these rail corridors, they were really important to the transportation and the expansion of the US, but also connected to the history that comes far beyond Western civilization, the indigenous people that lived there. And so they give us, by protecting those corridors as trails, it gives us a chance to protect that history, to protect the culture of the small towns that exist along those trails, and continue to keep that alive for people who visit now and for generations to come. This was a movement that was not sparked by the United States government. This was a movement that was sparked by a woman named May Watts. She was a naturalist. She lived in Chicago. And in 1963, there was a disused corridor, railroad corridor in Chicago that she thought really could be an incredible natural space right near the city. It's called the Illinois Prairie Path Trail today, and it's the first on-record kind of thought from somebody that, we could do a lot more with these railroad tracks than just kind of build more housing or more development. Shortly on the heels of that in 1965, the Elroy-Sparta Trail in Wisconsin was kind of the next in line in this history. And Wisconsin, the state, instead of an individual kind of calling for it and then pushing for it, the state, and the argument is who came up with the idea first, but I think that they heard about what was happening in Illinois, and they purchased the right-of-way for that railroad corridor, and it became the Elroy-Sparta State Trail. In 1976, we had the first legislation in the United States government to deregulate the railroads. That means it basically gave the railroad companies a lot more opportunities to make their own decisions about whether they would operate, how they would operate, and where they would operate. And embedded in that law was a pilot program, basically an early grant program to see if a railroad was no longer going to be in use. Could they fund things like what May Watts had come up with this grant program for rail trails? That didn't go very far. That grant program didn't really ever get a lot of attention at the federal government, which is why so much of this work happens because of citizen advocacy. But then, right on the heels of that 1976 act, there was an act in 1980 called the Staggers Act that fully deregulated the railroads and created mass abandonments. Any railroad that wasn't making money just was giving up their corridors, and there was no rules around that. So there was this really important Trail System Act that Brenda mentioned that was introduced and passed in 1968. 15 years later, in that window of time, we had this massive shift with railroads in our country. And so Congress, our kind of big governing body in the US, was very concerned that they were going to lose access to all of this transportation infrastructure. So they created the rail banking law, which allows us to basically protect those corridors as a trail first. And so it's so interesting that it started with people. We had to have some government intervention to put the legal parameters around it, but it continues with people. And these are some of the folks, with their picket signs advocating for, there's a railroad corridor. This is the Capitol Crescent Trail just outside of DC. There's a railroad corridor near where I live, and I want to see that as a walking and biking trail. When Rails to Trails Conservancy opened in 1983, there were fewer than 100 miles of multi-use trail on the ground nationwide, all of which would have been rail trail. Within the first 10 years of the organization, that had jumped up to thousands of miles. And if you think about within a 40-year history, you've gone from an idea and a concept to basically something that has transformed the American landscape in really meaningful ways. Just a little bit about the rail banking law. Again, it kind of is nestled under the National Trail System Act. And what it does is it creates a situation and a framework where anybody, any public citizen, any local government, any entity that is really a nonprofit organization like Rails to Trails Conservancy can basically file a petition to the governing body over the railroad infrastructure in our country and say that corridor is going out of use and we would like to see that as a trail. And there is a decision-making process that ensues, but it has become a very powerful tool to maintain those linear corridors all across the country. They can be reactivated as a railroad if there is a demonstrated need. It does not happen very often, but that Capitol Crescent example I showed where the people had their picket signs, that's one where actually the trail protected that corridor from mass development that happened around Washington, D.C. in that 30-year time frame, and then they didn't have any transit in that community, and they needed transit. So they took a piece of the Capitol Crescent Trail, they are turning that back into transit, public transit. It will connect into our public transit system, and it is being built as a rail with trail so that the trail connectivity continues and the railroad connectivity continues. And that is so important as an example because none of that would have existed if the rail trail hadn't been created in the 1990s. It would have all been housing, condos, and you would not have been able to get that back. So it's just such a powerful example of why that law matters so much in the United States. And what has happened in the time since then is that the public, we don't have the capacity to do the deep research that I heard about this morning, which I love. We do a lot of public opinion polling. We ask people to tell us what they think about this infrastructure. And we try to talk to people who aren't our members and who don't know us very well to find out just how much do trails matter to communities, to quality of life, to the public. And this is a recent study from 2023. 90% of people in the United States of America say that it is important that everyone have access to trails. And that is why it is such an important tool. The multi-use trail creates that access in a way that other infrastructure just can't do. 88% of people say that their tax dollars should be spent on trails. And when we have elections in the US and what politicians and elected officials are listening for is what do people want to prioritize, in my policies and in my platform and in my agenda? Well, this is a really important statistic for us because we can tell people, Republicans and Democrats and everyone in the middle, for the most part, agree that this is an important investment in our country. And 61% of people, with all of that access to trails, 61% of people say they would still like to spend more time in these spaces. And some of the barriers that get in the way are, do I know where they are? Do I have them close to where I live? And really, proximity and how much, do I have to get in a car and drive there? Or can I get on my bike and ride my bike there or walk there from where I live? That is a big barrier and a big focus of our work ahead. And then this, I think, is such an important statement because nature in and of itself is critical to our physical and mental well-being, but access to trails gives us access to nature in ways that we might not otherwise get because you might have to drive to that national park. You might have to plan a trip or a vacation. It requires that you have a certain level of resources to do those things. Trails make it possible to access physical activity right where you live for free, which is really important. Also creates economic opportunity. I think that example from Seoul is a wonderful one where there's businesses and there's shops and there's just this incredible chance to serve the community in a way that the trail creates that might not otherwise have existed. And then providing transportation. So as I mentioned in the US, we're very car dependent. This gives people a way to walk, to bike where they want to go instead of having to rely on the car. So who decides, who's part of the process to figure out if this is even going to happen? And I think it was so interesting to hear from Brenda earlier about kind of on the federal government side, all of those partners. On the nonprofit side, we're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak. We have to work with lots and lots and lots of entities to do that advocacy to say, let's fund this infrastructure, How do we want to build this infrastructure? What do we want to do with this land? It includes public and private individuals. That can be the people who live there, the people, we often think about folks as voters, the adults who are going to be making decisions about whether, if there's an initiative that's on the ballot, for example, that could fund this infrastructure, we need to convince all these people that that's important. We also need to convince the landowners. Sometimes you have people who own land adjacent to or who actually might own a small parcel of a railroad corridor, and you've got to really work with them to get them on board and to make sure they see what's in it for them. To work with the local government, that's the mayors, the cities and county councils, town administrators, planning commissions. These are all folks who have decision-making power about whether or not this project moves forward. At the state level, we have governors, we have legislatures, we have agencies very much like Brenda's at the national level in every single state. So that's times 50 plus Puerto Rico and Guam. And so their departments of transportation prioritize how funding is spent. Their departments of natural resources might have a role to play in how that funding is spent. Tourism and economic development all can either design programs, allocate resources to help get this infrastructure spent if they think that it's important. And then at the federal agency, we're working with the Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, Surface Transportation Board on the decision making, and again, that priority setting. It really comes down to what do people think is most important for their investment. And then we're working with Congress to create the laws that make that money available to us. And we're working with whomever is the president who is kind of guiding the priorities for the country to elevate this issue as one that Congress should take seriously and that other states and other agencies should take seriously as well. So I wanted to talk quickly about, that's the foundation, that's those 41,000 miles of multi-use trails. But the power that exists when we start to connect those trails, and some of what I loved in the maps and things that I saw earlier before lunch, is that so much more happens when we take what might be a 1 or a 2 mile segment and we connect that into a 10 or a 15 or a 100 mile segment, or this idea of a 3,700 mile connection across the entire country. We create more transportation options because people actually can use it to get where they're going without having to interact with traffic. That is huge. Or they can get to transit and they can kind of have a walk-bike portion of their trip, a transit portion of their trip. That's really revolutionary in the United States of America and really important as we think about how we're going to address climate change as a society. Super powerful for businesses. When trails become more connected, we see use go up by 40 to 80% depending on where it is. If it's a rural community or a more urban community, that brings more people out of their cars, spending money in the towns that they visit. They're buying water, they're maybe getting resources, they're maybe staying in hotel rooms, etc. Super helpful for the environment. It connects people to nature. It helps people understand the power of nature close to home, why we should protect that. But also this infrastructure is a tool for addressing climate and environmental concerns. It's used as wildlife corridors. It's used as flood mitigation. Depending on what's going on, you can design that multi-use trail. You can design that kind of community planning aspect to respond to the natural needs and the environmental needs of the place that you're serving. Creates new opportunities for health and well-being. It is so obvious that we need to move our bodies. It is not always so easy to do so, and this makes it so much more accessible for people from ages 8 to 80, and we know that that matters at all aspects of our life. And then trails in their design become opportunities for equitable access because they are linear, because they go places instead of being a destination only that people have to come to. So when we think about the power of connected trail networks and RTC's Trail Nation initiative, our focus is on trying to get as many trail networks in development as possible. And this is just a quick snapshot of the trail networks that are currently in design and development in the United States of America. There are 150. It started with that single letter to the editor from May Watts in 1963, and now fast forward just about 60 years, and we have 41,000 miles of multi-use trails and 150 regional trail networks in development. So that means in all of these places, which as you can see, we still have a lot of holes. We want those pins in every single open blank space. But all across America, more and more people are getting that access to those benefits. We're unlocking that opportunity that exists for people all across the country. That also makes possible this concept of the Great American Rail Trail. So very much like the East-West Trail. But the idea here is that the railroad once crossed the country this way. And there was a big celebration when the railroad could make it from the east where it started all the way out to the west. And we knew early as an organization, so on the left here is one of our co-founders, his name is Peter Harnick. Before we had all of the digital spatial data analysis tools we have now, we had maps on the wall with pins. And they would get phone calls from people saying, okay, we need your help here, we need your help there, there's a railroad and the corridor is going out of use and we don't want to lose it. And so they had a color for all of those railroads going out of use, and then they had a color for all of the rail trails in development, and then they had a color pin for the completed corridors. And you can even see it there, the kind of trail across the west, those pins showing where this would go. And then on the right is in 2016, we were still evaluating, could we do this project? We knew its potential for over 30 years, but we didn't have a way through the west because one of those railroad corridors called the Old Milwaukee Road was lost very early on. And so all of that land was in private ownership. There's not a lot of people who live in that part of the country. There wasn't a lot of that political will and that public will and that grassroots to get it done. And so every few years we would look and we would kind of see what the data was telling us about where either potential rail corridors were or where they were being developed. And in 2016, we found a route through the west. We launched the vision for the Great American Rail Trail in 2019, and it is more than 55% complete. We don't have an end target because these things take a long time. They take a very long time, but we expect in the next few decades it will be increasingly accessible. So in order for us to succeed in our efforts in the US, and I think possibly things as you look in the Asian Trails Network at how you might build more public participation into this process, how you might increase access to multi-use trails all across these countries, thinking about for us, we need those state-based partners helping us lead the way. We don't manage and own any of these trail corridors, so we need the state and the local partners to believe in this and to be a part of that management. We need to continue to be advocating for connectivity. We need that sustained, dedicated funding source. We need people at the local planning level, at the federal, at the state planning levels to be prioritizing investment in this infrastructure. And we need to keep fueling that political and that public will to get this done, because the people saying this matters is what makes it a priority at those government levels. One of the ways we do that, just real quick, is this idea of Celebrate Trails Day. It's a public event once a year that happens on trails all across the country. Last year, we had events in every single state. We had 20,000 people participate. They were out there moving their bodies. They were out there experiencing their trails. They were volunteering. They were practicing stewardship. They were going for bike rides. They were learning to bike. They were doing all these things. And we partner with our health department at the federal level to track how many minutes of physical activity does this generate? How much individual wellness does this help contribute? Because again, we want to build that prioritization. We want to build that political will for this infrastructure. And with that, all done. Thank you.
와우. 네, 거의 기차가 달리듯이 숨 쉴 틈 없이 열정적으로 발표를 해주신 브랜디 홀튼 레일스 투 트레일즈 선생님한테 큰 박수 다시 한번 뜨겁게 부탁드립니다. 네, 두 번째 발표를 해주실 분인 아시아 산림 협력기구 아포코의 팜덕치엔 박사님이십니다. 아포코는 아시아 지역의 산림 보건과 보전을 위한 국제 협력 기구로 다양한 회원국과 함께 성공적인 산림 보건 프로젝트를 수행해 왔습니다. 팜덕치엔 박사님께서는 아포코의 협력과 파트너십을 통해서 어떻게 산림 보건과 보전이 이루어졌는지 발표를 하실 예정이고요. 이 세션은 아시아의 협력 모델을 배우는 중요한 기회가 될 거라고 생각합니다. 팜덕치엔 박사님을 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다. 느긋하게 움직이시는 게 저희 삼촌을 보는 것 같아요. 네, 밤덕채연 박사님. 네.
Good afternoon, distinguished participants. First of all, I'd like to thank the KFS and the organizer for having me at this very important, very nice, and yes, interesting event, our fifth Asia Giant Conference. And my presentation today is, you see here, about the collaborations and partnerships of Africa for successful forest restoration and conservation. Actually, our topic is a bit you see, a bit different with our prior topic, but close, very close, because we also try to restore, to manage sustainable landscape and forest. Also conservation, biodiversity, and improving livelihood of local community as well. I will tell you, I will show you 5 parts of our presentation. The first is some introduction of AFOCO. So who, what is AFOCO? And the second thing is the memberships, engagement, and partnerships of AFCO. The third one is some programs and projects so far we have done. Of course, because of international organization, we have some forthcoming challenges, how to deal with this one, how to improve, and going forward. And the last one is some solutions, the way forward to deal with our forthcomings. Here, AFCO, we call AFCO the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization. You see, it formally established in 2018. It is the treaty-based intergovernmental organization, and it includes 14 member countries, now with 15 member countries, and 2 observers countries. And the secretariat, the base of the AFCO is in Seoul, Republic of Korea. And you see here the structure of the AFCO. Top is the assembly, including representative of all member countries. And then under the assembly, we have a secretariat, including some divisions, projects and program division, planning and operation division, and also we have one more, the regional office for Mekong region, based in Vietnam, for the Mekong countries. And here, the assembly, you see, we have 1 to 2 sections meeting each year to review what we have done so far, and then also to plan for what we're going next for 6 or 1 month on, and for the long run of AFCO. Here are some milestones of AFCO. You see, we formally established in 2018, but the proposal started in 2009. It's true, you see, the establishment of AFCO at the ASEAN Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit in 2009. And we also, you see here quite lots of events. And then 2018, formally establishment of AFCO. We also, at the same time, established the regional education and training centers based in Myanmar, where we have a lot of capacity building for member countries. Later on, I will show you about the center later. And we have quite lots of events, but here just some, we see, some main things. For instance, in 2020, we were the permanent observer status by UN General Assembly. And 2023, last year, we approved, you see, a very big strategic plan, the new plan for our development and operation. And also we see with the sustainable development goals of Paris Agreement, we have also the climate action plan. And I will show you a bit later. Here are some visions and missions of AlphaGo. The vision is here, I think the same with the choice network of our network. We like to have the greener Asia with climate resilient and sustainable forest, landscape, and communities. With the mission, you see here, in order to have our mission, we need to have some mission to implement and get it done, to promote action-oriented international cooperation for creating enabling policies, building capacities, and fostering inclusive multi-level partnerships to drive Asia forest into climate resilient and sustainable path. Here, very clear about our mission and visions of AlphaGo for the long run. Here are some engagement of our AlphaGo with the global organization. For instance, here, the AlphaGo projects and programs align with the global commitments, such as you see the Sustainable Development Goals of the Paris Agreement, or the Global Forest Goals, or the bond challenges. You see the same, and then we get closely involved in our global commitment. Here, so the AlphaGo memberships, as I said before, we have 16 member countries in Asia. At the moment, we have in Asian continent, include 15 member countries, including Tajikistan now formal member, and observer Malaysia and Singapore as well. And here you see the map of our AlphaGo region for member country. From the southeast, we are here, Republic Korea, and Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, and now we have some Tajikistan somewhere here. Here, the global engagement. Actually, we have engaged in quite lots of organizations, and here, just some, you see, for the main points. For instance, the observers of UN General Assembly, or partner of UN CCD, COP, or you see, for the conservation biodiversity. And later on, you see, for the indoor or the official supporting of the UN declare decade of ecosystem restoration, you see here. So restoration of forest and landscape. And we also develop a lot our ecotourism in our member countries, including you see national parks and the trails as well. But in many our member countries, we did not call the trails, but you call something like, you see, ecotourism or national park, entertainment or recreation or something like that. But I'm sure that later on they will join our network, the trail network in Asia. Here are the partnerships. Here, up to now, we have more than 30 MOU partnerships with many, you see, both international and also private sectors. partners. For instance, you see the Green Climate Fund, this one, very famous, ITTO from Japan, and FAO, C4 aircraft, GAF, and here we have, of course, we have KFS, a big donor, but I didn't mention here. RECOP-TC, and then Global Evergreening, and Rabobank. Rabobank is a very big private sector donor who we are in collaboration with them to develop the Rabobank projects dealing with carbon, reduce emission carbon for the agroforestry in developing countries. So very good donor. Here, up to now, we have some, show you something like our projects. Up to now, we have around nearly 50 projects dealing with, you see, we have nearly 100 million total USD for not very much, but still big money for dealing with, you see, restoration and conservation of forest, degraded forest. Climate change adaptation approach for systematic management of forest-related disaster, very important. As you see now, climate change, so landslide, flooding, and even you see the pandemic, COVID-19, before is also one kind of, you see, the climate change. And the last one, no, not one, last one, local livelihood improvement, very important. And finally, you see, the institutional capacity, resources, and regional actions, very important to link us together in order to deal with our big problem, global problems like climate change. For the 2024 only, we started 4 projects in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and particularly we established 2 gardens, ASEAN Korea gardens in Laos, PDR, and Vietnam, and for 2 years. But this one is for instance here, the ASEAN Korea gardens we established in Cambodia with the purpose, with the objective is at first to promote the human well-being for the local people, to rescue the threatened trees and plant species, to improve the awareness of local people and stakeholders in forest restoration, and also to improve biodiversity conservation and TFP, non-timber forest products, production, and also you see for the ecotourism as well, to promote, improve the purpose of our garden here. Here, so of course now it is on progress, and we will establish and have it finished next year in Vientiane, capital of Laos, PDR, the ASEAN garden here, just inside the capital of Laos, PDR. It's for entertainment, for human well-being, like our trail network purposes. So very close. And we call here something like, you see, the ecotourism. And so to get funds from them, from fee, entry fee, and other things, but later. Here, now I like to talk about the capacity building. Very, very important for every country, every organization. As I said before that, we established the regional education and training center in Yangon, Myanmar in 2018. And here is something like here, the building, and here around we have more than 100 hectares for experiment, of forest experiment as well in the field. We observe, offer, you see the short trainings, long trainings, customized trainings, and community development training as well. Here some kind, and then from 2019 up to now, we have trained around 1,000 trainees through our training center here for the member countries in collaboration with our member country and other international consultants organizations, as I said before. We also have other programs in our secretariat based in Seoul, the Republic of Korea. Here, something like you see the scholarship, PhD, master. We also have the fellowship program. At the moment, we have around 10 fellowship officers from our member countries working now in our secretariat. We also have science and technology exchange partnerships, where we have some 5 or 6 people every year to work at university in Korea and also work with our secretariat. And we have something like here, up to now, we have, 10 PhD, and here's 20, not 10, 20 masters, 35 internship fellowships, various meeting international, and we also, we have nearly 50 projects. And each project, we also have component of, we call awareness for local people, and also the capacity building, where we have short training course for the local people and relevant stakeholders. And up to now, we have some 1,000 trainees trained by our programs, so quite a lot. For instance, for only the Rabobank project running in Kazakhstan, we train around 5,000 farmers how to deal with the carbon and how to do to get involved in our projects, and later to get money from the carbon they produce every year. So it's very good. So capacity building is very important. We focus strongly on our capacity building. So without, you have natural resources, you have everything, but without the human resources, you could not do anything. That's the real things. Here something because we have 16 member countries, so we have projects, activities across our member countries. Here, we just show you something like our experience. For instance, we have the regional education and training center in Yangon, Myanmar, where we have a lot of trainings here for the local people from our member countries. And here we have, regeneration, or here restoration of natural forests, with endangered trees in Cambodia, mostly in Siem Reap. Here, I think we also have the garden of ASEAN Korean garden in Siem Reap as well, near our project sites, near Angkor and Angkor Wat. Here I think many people know Angkor and Angkor Wat in Siem Reap province, Cambodia. Here in Laos, PR, we have the villages, forest restoration by local people, by communities. So very successful here in Laos, PR. And mangrove forests, very important for, to improve the natural conditions, reduce the carbon, and to reduce its natural phenomena. Here, the mangrove restoration plantation here in Vietnam. And here, anti-FP, non-timber forest products. We implementing this project in 12 member countries. It's very, very big work for 12 member countries here. I think here is some meeting in Bhutan. Very, very, very high mountain country. And here we also have something like, forest fire management in our Mekong member country, in Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, and Thailand as well, the Mekong region country. Just here some experience about our international work, projects, and activities. Here, so how important our international collaboration and partnership to our success. Actually, we have very successful implemented our programs and projects so far with our member countries. And here we have quite lots of success factors. But the most important one is international collaboration and partnership. Very, very important, where we link together to share, you see, knowledge, expertise, network, investment opportunities, and also to implement together the international workshops, conferences, programs, projects, and capacity building as well. And that's why we have some, you see, our colleagues from US, very far from here. I heard that around 15 hours by direct flight, but they are here because we are here, international collaboration and partnerships. We are here to share knowledge, experience, and to link, to make our network better, improving for our global target. So I think it's very, very important. Of course, we have some obstacle in management because international, here is some, I just point some, I think, some points here. Because most of our member countries are developing countries, so we lack a lot of human resources, very, very important. So that's one. And then when we have some problems, so we also have problems with adaptive management. How to deal with a problem just out of our plan before. So how we could do with that. So that we really need the capacity building improvement. We have long and complex domestic process because you see we have 16 member countries. So each country has a very different procedure, policy, and many other things. Even the tax also very different. Even we have different system and report. For instance, here we have 16 member countries, and we have 15 with the same system. You see, financial year from January to December, but only Bhutan from July to the following June. So how you can deal with the problem? They started from July and finished the fiscal year in the following June. Very, very hard because reporting and everything we have to deal with as well. But we need the adaptive management as well. And also you see, because we are very different from policy, regulation, and then, so we have some we call regional projects. So one country relays, so every country has to wait for that country. So it's a very, very big problem for us as well. We also have some problems with our management as well. And again, human resources is also a problem. That's why we need to improve as strong as possible our capacity building. That's why our regional education and training centers established in Myanmar. Of course, now it's a bit hard for us as well. Myanmar is a bit harsh condition for us to normally operate, but we are trying our best to improve the situation for our capacity building. Here also, project size selection and other thing, because most of our projects, we have project size in the field, in the mountain as well, because forests in the mountain, in national parks, and with the local people, particularly for ethnic minorities. So quite lots of work to deal with, because many people there, they don't know the common language of the countries. So we need interpreter from English into their language, from their language into the indigenous language. Quite lots of times, but very interesting as well. Here, quite lots of things, and I just like to mention here something like climate change on very, very big problems. For instance, the drought, rainy pattern change, and even you see we all here experience about the COVID-19 is the phenomenon, natural phenomenon that you see created by, I'm sure that's something from climate change as well. And all things we have to deal with, that's one, by, I think at first, by capacity building, the adaptive management. Here, so what you need to do, as I said before that, because our organization is here, recently developed the new strategic plan and the climate change action here, according with the real situation, and particularly focusing on our international collaboration and partnerships. And we also revise our manual for establish, formulation, implementing, monitoring, and evaluation of our projects and programs. And particularly, we strengthen, you see, the international collaboration and partnership further to share our knowledge, experience, and particularly for the fundraising in order to have more projects and programs in our member countries. And participation community, many things. And also here, strengthening publication and dissemination. So I think our network is very good. That I just, you see, just put into the internet, I see very, very nice program in our network. So very nice. And the last one, very important, is promote funding sources. Mobilization is very important. In order to have more work, more program, we need more donors, because that one is not enough. And to deal with the bigger program, bigger task, we need more money. That's one is very important. And here's I just briefly talking about our mission, collaboration, and partnership about AFOGO organization. And thank you very much for your listening. And if you have any question or other things, so you can contact with us with that one. Okay, thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다. 혼자 잘 사는 것도 사실은 어렵지만 더불어 한 걸음을 내딛는다는 것은 참 이렇게 더디고 힘겨운, 그렇지만 엄청난 일인 것 같습니다. 각 지역에서 우리 걷기를 함께 하시는 분들, 그리고 작은 단체들을 이끌고 계시는 분들, 그리고 우리 길 연합회에서 함께 하시는 분들 모두 다 지역에서 힘들지만 국가 단위로 이렇게 지리산 둘레길처럼 큰 단위는 조금 더 어렵고, 이렇게 아포크처럼 더 큰 단위는 더 어려운 것 같습니다. 하여튼 함께 더디지만 꾸준히 끝까지 한번 길을 가보도록 하죠. 그래서 두 박사님, 팜덕치엔 박사님과 브랜디 홀틴 선생님께 다시 한번 뜨거운 박수와 토이 질문으로 들어가겠습니다. 혹시 두 분께 질문 궁금하신 점 있으시면 적어 놓으셨던 거 손을 번쩍 드시고 질문하시면 좋겠습니다. 손을 번쩍 들어주세요. 네.
Yeah, I'm Nicole from Supkir Foundation, one of the organizer of this Asia-Trace conference. Yeah, I have a question for Brandy. Thank you for your presentation. Also, Dr. Qian, thank you. So yeah, Brandy said that there are a lot of different parts of the partnership that you have made, right? And I was just wondering, what was the most difficult partner for you guys, as you see? I know it's kind of difficult for you guys to answer, but and then what would be your answer, and then what would be your solution to deal with that partners? Yeah, thank you very much.
That is a fantastic question and hard to answer. I would say that every difficult partner is dependent on the project itself. So in some situations, in many situations, the landowner can be a difficult partner. We have a project in a very rural part of the US right now where there are a handful of folks who have lived there for a very long time, and they are concerned about what change would feel like. And so that is true. I think it's a common theme when you have opposition, is what is change going to do to this place? So the solution is often to find ways to involve them in the process, to involve them in the conversations about what they want maybe that trail to look like, how they want that trail to serve their community, and to try to build that relationship that then gets them on board. Not everyone's always going to be happy when you're building something that touches lots and lots of neighborhoods or lots and lots of people, but it is involvement in that partnership with the individuals really does matter to the success of the outcome.
네, 여러분 다 동시통역으로 들으셨죠? 네, 반응이 이렇게 없으세요? 네, 잘 들으셨을 줄로 알고요. 네, 질문하신 분도 시원하십니까? 네. 아유, 경애롭습니다. 영어로 다 바로바로 들으신 거. 자, 혹시 또 질문 있으신 분이요? 질문 안 하면 나 오늘 잠 못 들겠다 싶은 이수광 박사님, 네, 질문해 주세요.
네, 동시 통역이 있기 때문에 저 한국말로 하겠습니다. You can use the translator. 팜덕치엔 박사님께 질문이 있습니다. 저희가 우리나라가 이제 그 조림 성공국으로서 이 경험과 이 노하우를 이제 아세안 지역에 전달하는 데에서 굉장히 큰 의미가 있는 것 같고요. 그런 측면에서 봤을 때 저희가 지금 보건과 관련된 사업과 프로젝트를 담당을 하고 계시잖아요. 근데 그런 게 굉장히 의미가 있고 특히 이제 교육적인 측면에서 저는 큰 도움이 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 이러한 것들을 이제 생태 관광이라든지 아니면은 뭐 길, 트레일 등과 관련해서 이제 연계하는 그런 프로그램이라든가 프로젝트는 혹시 계획하고 계시거나 아니면은 그런 사례가 있으시면 공유를 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Actually, as I mentioned in my presentation before, that in our member countries, actually the term trail is still very new, but we involve the term trails in our other term, for instance, for the ecotourism. Or we see we have some entertainment program in national park or nature reserve, or even has historic forest restoration areas even in Hanoi capital or other capital cities as well. But at the moment it's still very new for us. But I think in collaboration with NIFOS, I think we can evolve the trails, terms, and activities into our ecotourism projects in our member countries. For instance, we have many you see landscape, very beautiful landscape in our member countries, so we can develop and the network as well in member countries. And thank you very much for very nice and good suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Lee.
네, 감사합니다. 자, 네, 점심을 먹고 또 우리가 공부를 하다 보니까 집중은 하고 싶으나 몸이 마음만큼 따라주지 않는 것 같아요. 다들 약간 나른하신 게 나만 나른한 게 아니다. 자, 그러면 요 타이밍에 휴식 시간 갖고요. 바깥에서 커피 드시고 3시 5분에 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네. 커뮤니티가 자연과 연결이 될 수 있도록 하는 트레일 프로그램의 중요성에 대해서 이야기를 할 건데요. 포용적이고 접근 가능한 야외 활동을 제공하는 방법, 그리고 이를 통해서 커뮤니티의 유대감을 높이는 사례들이 하나하나 소개될 예정입니다. 이번 기회를 통해서 트레일 프로그램이 어떻게 포용성을 증진시키고 자연과 연결을 촉진할 수 있는지 함께 알아보도록 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 연사는 미국 메인의 휠체어 야외 활동 접근성 전문가 에녹 글리든 님입니다. 에녹 님은 어릴 적 척추 갈림증을 겪으면서 어려움을 극복하고 다양한 야외 활동에 참여해온 분입니다. 오늘 발표에서 장애가 있는 사람들이 야외 활동을 통해서 어떻게 모험을 즐기고 트레일의 접근성을 높일 수 있는지에 대해서 말씀을 해주실 예정인데요. 모든 사람이 자연을 더 쉽게 즐길 수 있도록 어떻게 프로그램을 운영할 수 있는가, 우리가 잘 배울 수 있는 중요한 시간이 될 것 같습니다. 에녹 글리든 선생님을 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
안녕하세요. I want to talk to you today. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about my life growing up as a person with a disability. And then I'd like to get into some more things about working with people with disabilities and doing trail assessments and accessible trails for people who have disabilities. I grew up in a small town in northern Maine called Patton. There's about 900 people in the town where I grew up, and I was the only person who used a wheelchair. So that meant that everybody pretty much knew who I was, and that I always had a group of people who were willing to help me do things. And because of that, I've been able to do quite a lot of things throughout my life. The first time I really remember accomplishing something, I started asking myself this question: how can I? And I started just answering that question. And the first time I really answered that question, or really remember answering that question, I was riding around in my parents' driveway, and I saw this dirt ramp that went off the side of the driveway, and I thought, I wonder how far I can get in the woods off that ramp. So I decided, well, I'm going to try it. And I pulled a wheelie and dove into the woods. And I just started pushing myself. There wasn't any trails. I just started making my own path. And I finally got to a place where I had to stop because there was a pile of debris. And I just sat there and thought about it. And then I got out of my wheelchair and started to crawl. And I made it a little ways, and then I found another spot where I could start going again. And that was really the first time I remember accomplishing a goal or an adventure by answering that question. I also had a little hand cycle up there in that right-hand corner. And technology's come a long way since I was that age. And now you can get hand cycles that are will have like off-road mountain bike tires on them, and you can go a lot more places with them. And so it's really come a long way since then. Okay, thank you. So I met the man there in the beard there. His name is Bob Dyer. I met him on my first day of junior high school. He was my physical education teacher. And on the first day that I met Bob, he walked up to me and he didn't ask me how I was. He didn't say hi. He said, "Can you do 20 push-ups in your wheelchair?" And of course, me being me, I said, "I can do 40." And I didn't know if I could even do one push-up, but I did the 40. And from then on, he didn't treat me like I was the kid in the wheelchair. He treated me like everybody else. And he pushed me to try things. And he got me into, I joined a basketball team, a wheelchair basketball team, and it was about 100 miles from my house to where we practice. So my parents had to drive me 200 miles round trip to go to games and practices. And that's when I started meeting people like me and seeing that people with disabilities could do everything like everyone else. And they had houses and they had families and they could drive cars and they could do all these things that everyone else does. And that really started to open my eyes to the possibilities that I could do a lot of things too. And then he took me skiing every year at a ski resort, actually near where I live now. And that first year that he took me skiing, I wasn't very happy with Bob. I started falling a lot and I was getting frustrated. But by the end of the week, I was making turns and I was on the lift and I started skiing. And from then on, I've been skiing for over 30 years now. And it's all because Bob took the time to take me skiing and show me that I could do it. Then he got me into wheelchair racing. And there's a marathon in the state where I live in United States, in Maine. And I did that Maine marathon 3 times. And I won every time, but I was the only wheelchair. So that meant I was going to win no matter what. And there was this, I would train every day when I came home from school. And it was a 20-mile round trip from my house to school and back. And there was a really big hill about 5 miles into the trip. And it took me 16 minutes to get up that hill. But on the way back, it took me a minute and a half to get down. And so one day I had a little speedometer on my wheelchair, and I decided to see how fast I could get going. And I made it 57 miles an hour down that hill with my wheelchair. So it was quite a thrill. And then I started getting into more extreme things later on in life. My dad went skydiving, so I had to try skydiving. And I found a place in Maine also that would take me skydiving. And we decided instead to duct tape my legs together so they wouldn't flap all over the place when I was falling through the air. And then when I landed, I just grabbed that duct tape, lifted my legs, and we just skidded in for landing. And then my dad bought an airplane, so I decided I had to figure out how to fly an airplane. And I found a place also in Maine that would take me to do flying lessons. And they have a little hand control that attaches to the rudder pedals, and then a bar that comes up with a circle on the end of it. And I put my arm through that circle, and I can move the rudder back and forth and put the brakes on when I land. And then it allows me to have my hand free to run all the other controls. Then a few years ago, my girlfriend Sandy bought me a gift certificate to go hang gliding. And that was an interesting experience because when I got there, I was putting on the harness, and the guy that was flying underneath me there said, "So I don't think the harness fits very well, but if you hold on to my straps, you should be okay." And that was a little scary, but I did it. And obviously it worked because I'm here. And that was an amazing experience. It's like being a bird. It's very peaceful. About 10 years ago, I got into rock climbing. And this was inspired by a friend who worked at a mountain in the United States called Mount Rainier, and he was a rescue ranger there. And I saw these pictures of amazing places that adventure and climbing had taken him, and I decided I wanted to see those places for myself. So I signed up for a rock climbing trip with a organization called Paradox Sports in the United States. And on that weekend, I met all these amazing people and another community to help me rock climb. And as I was sitting there and I was thinking, I thought I really like these little walls that we're doing, but I'd like to try something bigger. So one of the guys that was there suggested that I try a rock wall about an hour from my house called Cathedral Ledge in New Hampshire. And so we went there, and there's a fence at the top of the rock that's bolted into the rock, and we tied off the rope to that fence, and then we rappelled to the bottom. And when we got to the bottom, my friend and guide said, "Well, I hope you're ready to climb because the only way out of here is up. I am not carrying you back to the car." So 7 hours later, and about 600 pull-ups, we made it to the top, and that was when I realized that I love big climbing, and I wanted to climb something even bigger. So we started talking, and we decided I was going to climb El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. If you don't know what that is, it's about a 3,000-foot rock face. And so we wrote some grants and got some people together, and I went and climbed it, and it took about 5 days and about 4,000 pull-ups to get to the top. It was about a 2,000-foot route. And on that route, I had someone climb ahead of me and set ropes for me to climb so that I could do pull-ups on the ropes. And that's how I climb. I just do pull-ups on ropes. So that's my biggest accomplishment as far as adventure goes. But I also started a few years ago, I started working on trail accessibility and around the United States. And I go out and I just try trails, and then I see what obstacles there might be, or how the trail surface is, or different things that people might want to know about the trail. And then I write a blog about it, and so that people can look up that trail and find the information that they need to decide if it's accessible to them. So these are actually all rated easy. All these pictures are trails that were rated easy where I live. And if you can see down here in the lower left-hand corner, that is a very rooty trail. It's very difficult. But they also said that was easy. And that's really where the problem comes in, is when people try to find trails, they go by the rating, but who rated it? Because it could be rated by someone who was very strong and was very had an easy time going over that trail, but it might not be easy for someone else. So that's why I go out and try the trails, so I can tell people the real information, all the information about how the trail might be rooty or have rocks, or if it's wide enough, if there's steep hills, and anything that might make it more difficult. These are just a few videos of obstacles and things that I found on trails. So this is one, it was about 3/10 of a mile of stairs, and it didn't say that in the description. So when I got there, I didn't know this was going to be the case. So actually I had Sandy go ahead of me, and she went and checked, and we decided to turn around because it was going to be pretty difficult. And this is another getting over some rocks. And this is some very big roots. But that's how I do it. I look at the situation, and then I pick a point to get to, and then I stop. And then I see another point that I can get to, and I just pick my way through the trail until I can finish. So I'd like to talk to you about some things that we can all do, really, to help improve access for everyone in the outdoors. So in Maine, where I live, there's about 6,000 miles of trails. And I really try to advocate for improving those trails that already exist instead of building newer ones, because the trails that already exist already go somewhere beautiful. So if we can get people to those places, it'll open up a lot more space for other people to go and enjoy the outdoors. So if we can remove physical barriers such as bog bridging, which if you don't know what that is, they'll cut a log in half, and then they'll use the two halves of the log as a bridge to get over a muddy area or something that's needs to be protected from people walking on it. Large rocks, trees, and roots, and you can sometimes either just remove rocks, or you can reroute a trail, or you can cover roots, things like that. Hardened surfaces with stone dust. Stone dust is a very fine crushed rock that we use for trail building. You can put distance markers at different intervals, and that can help people who may have an idea of how far they can go. So if someone gets tired at a certain distance, they'll know they can go that far and then turn around. But if they don't know how far they've gone, they might have to be rescued because they can't get back. Add boardwalks in place of bog bridging. That's a big one because a boardwalk will make it much easier for someone to roll over. You can lessen steep inclines when possible, or even build side trails that go around steep inclines. There's a trail near where I live where they have built side trails that go around the obstacles instead of changing the trail, so that it leaves the challenge for other people, but lessens the challenge for people that need it. Widen trails where necessary to at least 36 inches or more, and cover or remove roots. So these are just a few ideas for adapting trails for various disabilities, not just people who use wheelchairs. People with visual impairments. You can add audio descriptions that can be accessed from a phone. That's a really good one, because then they can know what's around them and they can have an idea of the view that they're walking by. You can guide hikes. You can lend an arm to someone for leading, so they'll grab your elbow and then you can lead them along a trail. Transportation to hiking areas, this is a big one. So usually people with disabilities might not have transportation because it can be very expensive. And so having public transportation to various places that have outdoor access is a huge asset. Well-described trails on websites that are readable by a screen reader, which is a technology that allows people with visual impairments to have a computer or their phone read what's on the screen to them so that they can access that information about the trails. You can ask the visually impaired community what they need, and that's a really big one, is just asking the community what they need and then giving that to them. And then a rope alongside of the trail is a very low-cost way to allow someone to just grab the rope and then walk along a trail and be able to guide themselves so that they can access that trail. Cognitive disabilities is a big one, and information is a really big way to give them comfort and to allow them to know what to expect before they get to the trail. So if you can describe the sound profile of the area, is it urban? Are there birds? Is there traffic? Is there bicycles whizzing by? That can startle people if they don't know what sounds are going to be there. You can describe the smells encountered, because some people have problems with different smells or strong smells. Describe the textures encountered. So some people either like to have different textures or might not like different textures. So knowing that ahead of time helps. The types of the trail uses. Telling people if there's bicycles or horses, or if it's more people run on the trail or walk on the trail. It allows them to know what's going to be around them and what to expect coming up behind them, or if they're going to meet a horse along the trail. And then have activities at resting spots. This is a good one for people with cognitive disabilities. You can have different workout equipment or different activities to learn about the trees and the environment along the trail. So physical disabilities doesn't just mean people who use wheelchairs. It can be people who may just not be able to walk as well. It can be people who may have limbs missing. It can be lots of different things. And so having guided hikes for people in general is a good way to get people out on trails, because once you show them that they can do the trail, then they start to realize, well, maybe I can do other things. And then it sparks something, and it creates this movement for them to be able to do lots of other things. Adaptive equipment, having that available for people is a huge one, because there are wheelchairs that have bigger tires. There are track chairs that have tracks like a bulldozer or something like that. There are off-road hand cycles, like I said, that even have e-assist, like an e-bike, that allow people to go a lot of places that they wouldn't normally be able to go. So having that available to people through either an adaptive sports program or a gear share program can really open up a lot of different places for people. Having detailed information about trails. So having the distance of the trail, the width of the trail, the surface of the trail, any obstacles, the steepest incline, and things like that will allow people to decide if that trail is accessible to them or not. And then transportation, of course, is a big one. And then gear libraries, like I said, is a good way to share equipment with people, and so that they don't have to come up with thousands of dollars to buy it themselves. Writing better descriptions. So this allows people to decide if a trail is accessible before they leave the house, because it can be very frustrating to drive a distance of maybe 2 hours and then get to a trail and not be able to do the trail because the description was wrong. And I have definitely had that happen to me. I was out on a trail one time, and it was called the Boardwalk Trail. So I assumed it was going to be all boardwalks. Well, when I got there, there was boardwalks, but there was also bog bridges in the middle of the boardwalk. So they had a piece of boardwalk and then a bog bridge and then another piece of boardwalk. And they didn't say that in the description. So I wasn't able to do that trail after I got there. So having the steepest and average running slope, having the steepest and average cross slope, the obstacles with the distance from the trailhead, and pictures, because pictures are really good to allow someone to really visualize what they're going to encounter. The width of the trail, the surface material. So stone dust is really good because it packs really firm. But if it's big gravel or big rocks, sometimes that can catch on my wheels, and it slows you down, and it makes it really hard to push over the surface. And then descriptions can be written in paragraph form, or just have this list and then a paragraph below it, so that people can see the quick information and decide whether or not they want to try the trail, but they can also see more details in the paragraph form. So this is a park not too far from my house, and so it mentions like following the length of the pond, moderately sloping, and various other things, but it doesn't give a lot of detail about what is that slope and what is the length. So there are things that needed to be added to make it a little bit more useful. Like, what is the length of the pond? What does moderately mean? What is the slope? Describe the side trails. Where and how often are the benches provided? And where are the bird watching locations, and are they accessible? So having more details about the various things that are mentioned can help people to decide if they can do this trail or not. This is a really long one, but it is very good. I won't go over all of it, but it gives the length, it gives the surface, it gives that there's an accessible path at the top that's 500 feet in length. It tells the slope, it tells the cross slopes, it tells how far the slopes go. It gives a lot of information that is really helpful for people to decide whether they can do the trail or not. There are no obstacles over 1 inch in the treadway. That's another good one. Because above that, it can be hard to go over obstacles that are bigger than that in a wheelchair. And it can slow you down and make it harder to push. Enhancing descriptions. So pictures of obstacles is a really good one. The distance of the obstacles, so if, say, there becomes a narrow spot in the trail that someone might not be able to get through, if they know how far it is to that narrow spot, then they'll know, well, I can at least go to that place. Or they'll know if they might need help at that place. So knowing how far they can go is a really good thing to give them. Pictures of the trail in general. Pictures of the parking can be helpful, because a lot of times it'll be a dirt parking lot and not have actually designated spaces. So then when you get there, someone might park too close to you, and you wouldn't be able to get out of your car if you use a wheelchair. So knowing that is really helpful. The amenities available with the pictures. So if there's a bathroom, if there's water fountains, anything associated with the trail. So having that information can be helpful if people know they can use the bathroom when they get there and know they can get a drink of water. The views to see, maps with colors signifying different areas. This is another good one. So if you can have a line on the map of the trail, but then have different colors at different sections. So say there's a muddy section, you might make that line brown in that section. Or there's a grassy section, you might make it green. So that way people can see how far they'll have to go through the mud, or how far they'll have to go through grass or various other surfaces. All pictures have to have descriptions for the screen reader. That's another good tip, because people with visual impairments need to know what's in those pictures. So having all your pictures described is a very key thing to have. And all descriptions have to match in all areas. So if you have a brochure, if you have a website, and then you have another piece of information somewhere else, all of those descriptions need to match, because someone might find one of those things, but not all of them. So how can we include the disability community in what we do? And this is really the major part of what I'm trying to do, is just include everyone. First, we need to start with an inclusion mindset. How can we reach the most people possible? Is there a group we're not including? Why are they not included, and then how can we include them? And what can we do differently to ensure inclusion? And I would challenge everyone to use the role that you're in your different organizations to maybe answer some of these questions and see what you can do to include as many people as possible. Go to the source. This is huge. If you just go to the community and ask what we need. So go to the visually impaired community, go to the wheelchair user community, and say, what do you need on trails, or what do you need at various locations, and then take that advice and do those things. You can do surveys and focus groups. That's a good one. That's basically what I do. I go out and I test trails, and I give them feedback, and then they take that feedback and they fix the trails. Work with a consultant, so that's what I do. Hire someone with a disability and have them test out your trails or test out your various properties to see what they can and can't do, and then take that feedback and make the changes necessary to make it more usable for everyone. And then show people with disabilities doing things on your properties. Because if people can see that they can do it, then they know they can do it. So if you show people with wheelchairs out on different trails, or people with a visual impairment out on trails, then those people can see themselves doing it, and they might be more likely to go out and try it. And then share all of those things far and wide. Share it with as many people as possible. Tag disability organizations in your postings on social media so that their members and their clients can see your properties with people using them. Caption your videos so that people who can't hear the video can still know what's going on in the video. Voice controls are good for people who use voice controls to run their various technology so that they can still play the videos. And then enable color modification when possible. So this is for contrasting. People with visual impairment, sometimes they're not completely blind, and they can see if they can change the color contrast of the text or pictures that's on the screen. So having that capability can open up that information to a lot more people. Then this is huge. So language matters. And over the course of my life, the word for disabled or disability has changed 3 times. First, it was handicapped when I was younger. Then it was disabled. And now we use people first language, which is putting the person first. So I'm not a paraplegic man, but I'm a man with paraplegia. And so using the correct language can make people more comfortable and make people more likely to want to engage with your program or with your properties. If the disability is not the focus, it shouldn't be mentioned, because it doesn't really matter what people can't do, it only matters what they can do. It only matters that they can push themselves, or if they need help, then that's good to know. But knowing what they can do is going to open up a lot more possibilities for them. A common mistake in referring to those with disabilities is to use language that labels them as a victim or in distress. So saying that someone suffers from a disability isn't necessarily true, because I'm not suffering, I'm not in pain, I'm just living my life. And so implying that they suffer isn't necessarily always going to be true. Sometimes we go to programs, I know I do, and people will get very excited about seeing someone with a disability doing something. And it can be a little bit, it can make people uncomfortable sometimes when people start cheering or being overly enthusiastic about it, because it draws the attention to that person. So sometimes that can make people uncomfortable. Terms like differently abled, challenged, or handicapable should also be avoided. Making up words is not really a good way to focus on people with disabilities. So just using factual information is really the way to go. And then tips on interactions with people with disabilities. So address people with disabilities in the same way you would anyone else. Talk to them just like you would anyone else. Use a normal tone of voice. Don't patronize or talk down. Never attempt to speak or finish a sentence for a person. So sometimes people with a cognitive disability will have trouble with their thought process. And so if you ask them a question, or you're talking to them and they're trying to answer you and then you repeat yourself, it starts the process of thinking over again. So it makes it difficult for them to answer the question. So giving people more time to answer questions and to express what they're trying to express can help the conversation and help them be able to give you the information that they need to give you. Speak directly to a person. So this has happened to me quite a few times when I'm out with Sandy or friends, and I'll be the one talking to someone, and they'll talk to the person behind me. Make sure you're always talking to the person who you're actually talking to. So if someone's booking a hotel room, for instance, and the person with a disability is booking the hotel room, then you should be talking to them, not the person with them. Repeat the information or statement back to a person. So if you're trying to, for instance, booking the hotel room, if you're trying to clarify what they need, repeat it back to them so that you both understand that you know what you're both talking about. And then don't be afraid to fail, because disability is a huge topic. There are a lot of different disabilities. You're never going to be an expert on all of it. And it's just trying is really the way to go. If you're trying, then things are going to happen and you're going to make progress. And this is the big thing. If it's public space, everyone should be able to access it. So let's all work to make sure everyone has access. And I'd like to thank everyone for their hospitality, and I'd like to thank the group that's going to go hiking with me tomorrow. I'm glad you were able to make it for my presentation. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 장애인뿐만 아니라 남녀노소 모든 사람이 자연을 더 쉽게 즐길 수 있는 프로그램, 그리고 운영, 그리고 태도에 대해서도 함께 배울 수 있는 그런 시간이었습니다. 유쾌하고도 진지하게 귀에 쏙쏙 들어오게, 어쩜 이렇게 귀에 쏙쏙 들어오게 발표를 해주시는지, 네, 에녹 글리드님께 다시 뜨거운 애정의 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 다음은 대만 천리보도협회의 서명겸 부이사장님의 발표입니다. 서명겸님은 대만의 생태 트레일 프로그램을 이끌며 다양한 그룹이 자연과 연결될 수 있는 기회를 창출하는 데 중점을 두고 있습니다. 오늘 발표에서는 환경교육과 산림치유에 초점을 맞추어서 트레일 관리의 새로운 모델을 제시해 주실 예정입니다. 이 세션은 트레이를 통해서 다양한 그룹을 통합하고 자연과 연결하는 방법을 배우는 중요한 기회를 마련할 것입니다. 자, 큰 박수로 서명겸 부이사장님 모시겠습니다.
어, 大家午安，大家好。好，谢谢谢谢。非常荣幸有机会可以在我们第5届亚洲布道大会跟这么多优秀的讲者一起同台，来介绍我们在台湾所做的一些工作。那我的部分呢，主要的重点会是放在台湾千里步道协会，我们在推动手作步道，用手做步道这件事情，它如何能够把各种各样多元的群体，换位思考，就是我们透过去做步道这件事情，我们转换我们自己的角色，去理解对方。那在这个过程中，我们累积了一些故事跟案例。接下来我会先向大家简单的介绍，千里步道协会，我们在过去这将近20年的时间里面，到目前为止已经走到了第5阶段的工作。那在从最初我们发起环台湾1圈的环岛千里步道，那这个梦想大概花了4年左右的时间，完成了将近3000公里的路线调查。那这个步道并不是只是要让人去运动或者是走路而已，这背后包括我们希望我们步道周边的美丽风光都可以被保留下来，还有就是可以提供行人跟自行车友善安全行走的环境。另外就是希望透过大家用走路的方式去促进社区的经济。这几个目标其实是千里步道协会一开始就很希望能够达成，透过步道。那所以第2阶段的部分，我们也花了大约4年左右的时间。当我们环岛步道路线确定以后，随即面临了很多的挑战。这个挑战包括各种各样的开发的压力，本来的天然海岸就被水泥化，或者是要开发。好，那所以我们千里步道协会做了很多环境保护的运动，其中有一个很重要的就是我们希望不要让步道铺上水泥，而是保持它天然的样貌。那这个方式就是所谓的手作步道。那在这4年中间，我们发现我们可能需要更主动的走在政府前面。也就是说，我们开始推动我们3条国家绿道长距离步道的推动。那这个过程呢，我们也大概花了4年左右的时间。在座的几位亚洲步道的组织，我们也分别让台湾的Raknus Selu 跟Jeju Ole 缔结了友谊步道，然后我们的这个潭南Ancient Trail 跟这个 Miyagi Trail 缔结了友谊步道。那还有另外一条 Mountain to Sea Greenway， 那这些都是我们正在推动的长距离步道。我们推动的目的是希望透过这个议程的设定，能够把我们刚刚所希望达到的目标都游说政府来接受、来执行。那在第4阶段，我们非常荣幸的就是参与到亚洲步道联盟这样的一个大家庭。我们包括在疫情过后，感谢亚洲好几个伙伴组织，在2022年底的时候来到了台湾，我们一起完成了上一届的亚洲步道大会。那同时，我们希望能够把更多国际的案例介绍到台湾来，也希望能够让台湾走出去，透过步道。那现在我们正在进行的第5阶段，其实它的任务更加的复杂。 他会要继续前面很多需要做到的事情。那所以我们现在的这个任务也越来越繁重了。那这几条是我们从地理上看到，台湾的长距离步道，我们其实希望透过长距离步道，可以团结台湾内部的共同体的感受，透过每一条都有国家代表性的主题，然后去跟世界有一些连结。那这里面其实也包括刚刚有提到，就是我们其实有在参考 Rail to Trail， 就是我们有一条以前是在甘蔗的生产糖的旧铁道，那这一条是我们正在发展中的国家绿道。好，那千里步道在做的这些事情里面呢，接下来我们要谈为什么我们要谈手作步道。那这其实是我不知道其他国家的经验是怎么样。以我们台湾来说，我们的步道大部分都是用这种工程，然后画图，然后非常的规格，做到了自然里面，然后铺上了水泥，所以大家可以在画面上看到，基本上这是一条有一个人带着狗去散步，人跟狗都不走的步道，因为它太陡了。好，那所以在做这一些工程设施步道的时候，它有非常多的材料会运到了自然里面，它的碳足迹非常的高，产生了很多的废弃物，维护成本非常的高，而登山的人又不喜欢走，所以我们在想有没有更好的方式可以去解决，让步道看起来又很自然，又可以满足登山或多元的使用的需求。所以在这个过程中，18年前，我就先后到了包括美国的阿帕拉契山径，冰岛、英国、纽西兰，还有包括这个引进了其他国家的一些课程，来训练我们的公民可以变成专业的步道师。那也包括去日本，我们发现其实亚洲拥有跟其他西方国家不一样的步道特色，就是我们有很多的就是用石头做的古道。那这些工法其实都可以承载400-500年以上的历史。我自己在昨天的经验里面，我感觉智异山似乎也有这样子的传统工法。那我想这一些经验带给了我非常多思想上的启发。但是呢，这里面我们必须要发现，就是每一个国家地方的文化或制度都不一样，所以我们怎么样找到在台湾发展手作步道的这种方式呢？我们透过了刚刚所讲的各个阶段的努力，去包括这里面有林务局的局长，有客家委员会的主委那他们都亲自来动手做步道。那这是一个高山型的步道的案例，我们看到过去这个政府用工程的方式，而现在我们招募志工一起来完成，其实可以促进大众对于步道守护的一种参与感跟责任感。大家可以看到在这个画面上面，本来很深的冲石沟，经过2天志工们的合作，我们把它完成的样子。那这是一个手作步道的案例，我们同时在专业化的部分协助国家公园还有林务局完成了步道的工法手册。那在专业化的部分，我们训练了到目前为止将近80位的步道师。那不只是对专业，我们也希望对一般大众，他们也可以随手帮我们做回报。所以我们创立了一个iTrail.tw 这样子的一个公民科学家守护步道的网站。我们用一个网站的这是手机的界面，我们可以看到步道的五个问题。我们把步道问题分成5个类型：拍照、回报，然后在这个网络上我们就可以看到大家回报的问题，然后我们就可以依据大家反映的问题去跟政府部门要求。那这些故事，我们已经操作了170条的步道呢，我们也向大众做一些科普的书籍的推广。那这里面收录了几个故事，是跟 让多元的群体能够融入的一些故事哈。好，那这个是一个案例，这个案例讲的就是我们如何，就是上一位讲者提到的，我们如何邀请行动不方便的人跟我们一起去体检国家森林游乐区。那这个是我们在花了3年左右的时间，走遍了台湾的所有的国家森林游乐区，然后我们去检视在设施上面现在有什么问题，然后在这个过程中，我们发现台湾有一些特殊性，就是我们其实山很高，可是平地很窄，所以步道不免有很多自然条件的限制，所以不是所有的地方都能够做到完全都是无障碍的。所以我们就透过了一些指标的设计，来，特别是在自然条件能不能克服这件事情上面，我们把18个森林游乐区分成4个等级。第1级就是我们马上就应该做一些什么事，第2级呢，我们可能需要做一些规划，第3级可能在动线上我们要重新检讨，那第4级呢，可能只能够提供基本的设施。透过这样子的一个分级完成之后呢，我们就开始引进志工的手作步道来参与了哈。首先大家可以看到，这是在台湾北部一个非常热门有瀑布的国家森林游乐区。当时我们勘察的时候，必须要把轮椅搬上去。那后来我们发现了一个，我们重新设计了一个动线，我们透过木栈道来弥平这样子的一个落差。那这个面板的锁面板的呢，这个就是我们招募志工来做。那这件事情其实我觉得它的意义在于说，它不是让工程把它做完了，然后没有任何人知道，然后大家就只是去使用。我们希望有在做步道的过程中，卷动越多人来一起做这件事情，让这个行动不便的人的需求被看见。那同时呢，我们也立刻就办了一场活动，就是推林务局的局长，还有各个林管处的处长，我们让他们互相角色扮演，有人推轮椅，有人坐轮椅，他们就一起体验行动不便的人的需求。那其实这个反应非常的好哈。然后后来行动不便的人，我们也帮他们办了一场在森林里面的瑜伽跟音乐会。当然这个现在大家看到这个现场，很快在4、5年之后经历了一场很严重的台风，所以这些设施全部都被大自然推下来的土石覆盖了，所以现在完全无障碍了，根本没有坡道，就是全部通通都是平的。那另外一个换位思考的，就是我们透过大家来参与手作步道，我们希望大家换一个角度想的。刚刚前面讲的是，我们去理解，透过参与去协助行动不便的人，我们去了解他们的需求。那在这个案例里面讲的是，我们怎么样把我们从人作为所有万物的主宰的角色，变成是我们是大自然的一部分。这件事情其实也是一种换位思考。那我们提出了一个天然步道零损失、水泥步道零成长的愿景。在这个过程中，我们发起了台湾步道日。我们要大家脱下鞋子去感受不同的铺面，然后我们透过大家的调查去调查铺面的现况跟我们生活的关系。那我们得到了一个数字是台北市，这是台湾的最大的一个城市的步道呢，它的水泥步道的比例达到了3/4。那所以这个数字也就唤起了大家开始想要守护我们的步道，让它能够更自然化。但是怎么做到呢？我们跟社区大学合作开步道学的课程。我们希望步道学的课程不是只有训练工程，它也要能够了解自然、了解历史人文、了解政策法规。然后希望上过这个步道学课程的学员呢，他透过参与公共的参与的行动，从一个只是走路的路人，变成是公民，从是消费者、环境的消费者，变成是具有一定程度的户外专业者。那这样子的一个发展，我们可以看到公民社会的促进， 这些陌生的人透过在步道这样的一个公共空间里面相互合作，促进了民主社会里面所需要的信任，对陌生人的信任。那同时呢，我们也开始发现，我们开始有一些，比如说地方法院，他们有一些受到就是算是有犯过一些罪，但是不是非常严重，需要关到监狱里面的这一些青少年，法院来找我们，说我们可不可以为他们规划手作步道，让这一些小孩可能是过动症，就是我们所说的大自然缺失。当我们从小失去了大自然的时候，可能在行为上面会产生的各种各样的偏差，所以我们就为这一些孩子安排了手作步道。当然，这个过程我们其实一开始是很紧张的，因为我们没有经验，所以我们需要非常多的社工师、社会福利的团体，还有法院的专门的老师来陪同。那但是在这个完成的过程中呢，大家的效果是非常好的，就是在经过第一次办理之后，他们就说他们希望能够持续的办理下去。我看过一些国外的案例是，不是透过手作步道，而是安排这一些犯过罪的年轻人去走很长距离的步道，他也能够达到类似的效果。那我们也帮就是体制外的，就是没有上正式学校的小孩子跟他们的家长去设计手作步道。那除了去现场做步道之外呢，我们带他们玩游戏，我们设计了一些游戏，让他们用，比如说现在大家画面上看到的小孩子，他们用脚来扮演被踩踏的步道，然后呢，小孩子要轮流当走路的人，从他们身上走过去。这个时候就会产生很棒的团体动力的讨论，因为他们会不忍心，会不愿意去踩踏这一些植被。那所以在这个过程中，我们就可以带孩子去讨论。这个是我们带孩子去讨论，以前的古道是用扁担挑茶叶，所以那个阶梯的高度是配合挑扁担的这个节奏的哈。那所以我们透过这样告诉他们，以前古人在这里生活的故事，其实跟古道的功法息息相关。我们透过办工作假期，也就是说，不是只是走路，而是去结合社区的生态旅游，他们的特色。我们3天2夜里面，让志工付费去度假，其中呢有一部分的工作是去做步道，然后呢，另外就是在社区里面参与他们社区的游程，在地方消费。那这个效果也非常好，大家可以看到这里面有非常多的原住民的社区。我们在台湾不同的地方办手作步道的工作假期的时候，他学习到的东西都不一样。同时，我们也引进了日本的所谓的森林益康，就是森林疗愈。在这里面，我们知道口水里面的一些含量检测可以知道你的压力指数，所以我们透过实验，就是让参与手作步道的人在做步道之前测一次，做完步道之后测一次。那我们可以发现说，其实大部分的人在城市里面工作的人，他们非常需要抒压，非常需要去发泄，所以做手作步道这件事，其实会带来他们这个各种各样心理压力的释放。那在这个过程中，我们也开始跟原住民进行学习。我们台湾有非常非常多的，总共有超过16个族群的原住民族。他们从过去在这个岛屿上面生活，就已经非常的了解怎么使用在地的材料去铺设步道。所以呢，我们可以看到这种石头是很扁的，所以要做一个阶梯的时候需要非常多层。那这个其实都是这些80、90岁的老人家，他们告诉我们怎么做。而我们进到现场的时候，发现很多年轻的原住民已经不会做这个工作了。甚至在语言上面也已经失传了，所以我们如何给这些原住民的老人家荣耀？我们就是开始荣誉步道师的这个颁奖。我们发现他们的传统功法，我们邀请他们全家来这个领奖，帮他们拍纪录片，记录他们的功法，因为我们希望他们的族群应该为这个事情感到骄傲，他们要把这个传统智慧传承下去，而且这个也会是 当他们要办工作假期的时候，可以带来社区经济的发展的机会。那这也就是我们跟不同的原住民族的合作。那现在我们在台湾总共其实已经有12组的荣誉布道师，他们分别代表了不同地方的特色。那我们稍微看一下，在台湾南部的2个鲁凯族跟排湾族，他们的生活环境。从生活环境，他们是这一种一片一片的石头，到他们学会怎么样踩这些石头，切割它，背它，一个人背，2个人背，很多人背，然后它是一个整个就是族群的庆典，一个祭典，透过这个祭典来修路，来搬运，团队一起整个社区总动员去合作，所以我们就开始跟林业单位来办训练课程，我们邀请这一些原住民的老人家出来教他们的年轻人，同时我们结合了考古，因为原住民没有文字，所以他们的旧的部落里面，其实它每一层的土壤层都是它的文化。那所以当我们进行挖掘的时候，我们必须非常小心，才不会把他们的历史的时间颠倒。所以在这个施作之前，我们就会请考古的专业的学校，他们去采集，比如说陶片啊、石器时代的石头啊，他们帮我们做分类，然后我们才进行开挖。也就是说，我们一面协助做工法传承，一面修复旧部落的古道，一面来协助原住民族重建他们没有文字的历史。那这个是我们持续的在办理这些事情。好，那我想然后也还有一些应用啦，就是说包括绘画、出版，或者是今天晚上大家将会看到的亚洲步道影展。我们相信，透过各种各样多元的方式，能够让更多人能够参与到步道这件事情里面来，透过艺术，透过各种各样的管道。最后一个我想要跟大家分享的案例，是我从2009年开始带着大学生做步道的一个研究。那这个是台湾大学的学生，他们如何在做手作步道这件事情中，感觉到了环境教育，他们对环境、对自然的态度，从刚刚所讲的，我们是万物之灵，我们是人类，是世界的中心这样的一个角度，转变成我们开始关心生态。那这件事情我觉得非常的神奇，我们可以看一些照片，从原来没有路，然后这些学生要砍树，当然这一切是合法的，我必须先说明哈，这个是有申请砍树哈，然后那他们在砍树的过程中开始感受到跟自然的冲突，到底我们使用这些自然资源是不是在破坏环境？他们开始产生了第一个很好的问题。然后，但是当他们开始逐渐发现，如果没有维护的步道，它可能会带来更大的问题。然后，当我们知道我们要使用这一片森林里面哪一棵树，这件事情需要生态知识，需要我们去理解。那所以，你可以看到，他们就慢慢的透过这个做阶梯、做边坡，然后呢，完成了一个他们人生从来都没有。大家都知道，这一些大学生呢是台湾顶级的大学生，他们从小到大只会念书，不会拿任何的工具。这是他们第一次让自己可以趴在土上面，把全身弄得很脏。那所以这个成就感相对来说也是非常的大的。所以你可以看到中午在吃饭的时候，他们可以不顾一切的睡在地板上，这个在过去应该是不可能发生的事情。那所以我们透过问卷，我们在室内课之前做一次问卷，室内课结束之后呢，做一次问卷，去做步道的之后再做一份问卷。另外有一次的实验是3个月后再做一次问卷。这里面的那个内容，因为在大家的手册都有翻译，我不打算一个一个说。简单来说，我们其实测他们对于环境的态度、环境的行动，还有跟自然连结的感受， 那还有这个他们之后会不会采取或改变他们日常生活的环境行动哈？那结论哈，因为这个数字非常多，结论就是我们发现，同样是上山的，只是走路跟有做步道的两组学生相比的话，有做步道的他在各方面的改变的效果都非常的显著啊。然后呢，最厉害的是，他们竟然有很大的成就感，是他们开始觉得他们可以回到自己的日常生活中，去向其他人游说，去参与其他的环境行动，包括他们会自己开始从自己的生活带环保杯、减少垃圾等等等等等等。那这些效果让我们看到一个事情，我觉得这个图表是非常重要的事情，就是过去在环境教育的讨论里面，大家都会说，我们必须先透过走步道，让人开始关心自然，然后我们开始关心以后，就会开始有想要了解更多，了解更多之后，我们就想要用行动去保护它。可是过去这20年来，我们至少台湾的经验是发现，自然导览解说或者是纯粹的徒步活动，并没有让这样子的这个连锁反应发生就是我只是去走了，但是我并没有感觉到我跟自然是一体的。但是如果我们是从做步道这件事情，也就是先从行动开始，我们可以从这些学生身上看到，这些行动带动了他们想要了解更多。以后他们回到自己的生活的时候，他们会关心这一群台大的学生在做了几次步道之后，他们在台大自发性的成立了社团，一直运作到现在。那我想这其实是一个很好的收尾。这张图我们可以看到不同的物种，大家可以在一个地方一起很和平的相处。我们希望手作步道，或者是亚洲步道联盟，或者是我们跟国际之间，就像这样子的一个画面一样，步道能够连结，能够让我们换位思考。谢谢大家。
네, 잘 들었습니다. 손으로 만드는 길을 통한 환경교육과 산림치유. 정말 머리로 하는 기억보다 몸의 기억이 정직하다라고 저도 생각하는데요. 온 몸의 세포가 하나하나 기억하다 보면 평생 이 기억은 정직하게 가는데, 대만에서 아주 훌륭한 손으로 만드는 길을 통한 교육을 하고 있어서 인상적이었습니다. 다시 한번 서명겸 박사님께 뜨거운 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 서명겸 박사님과 에노클리딘 선생님과 함께하는 토의 및 질의응답 시간이 되겠습니다. 혹시 포용적 커뮤니티를 위한 트레일 프로그램에 대해서 여러 가지 배우고 이야기를 해봤는데요. 질문이 있으시면 번쩍 손을 들어주시기 바랍니다. 네.
예, 저는 그 서명겸 선생님께 질문을 드리고 싶은데, 이제 우프라고 하는 그 단체가 있잖아요. WWOOF 해서 이제 여기 화엄사에서도 예를 들면 이제 친환경으로
우프에 대해서 설명을 해주세요. 통역하시는
Do you know
분을
우프?
위해서.
WWOOF. WWOOF. 이게 그 이제 국제적인 친환경 연대 단체인 것 같아요. 그래서 워킹 홀리데이처럼 이제 먹을 거하고 자는 것만 제공을 해주면 거기 그 농촌에 가서 친환경 유기농 활동을 하는 거예요. 그래서 이제 가령의 화엄사에서도 여기 차 따는 작업을 벨기에, 뭐 프랑스, 캐나다 그 청년들이 와서 그 먹고 자는 것만 해결을 해주면 그 활동을 이렇게 전개를 하는 걸 봤어요. 그래서 혹시 그 아까 그 뭐 대만 대학의 그 청년들, 대학생들이 이 트레일을 이렇게 보강하고 하는 일을 이제 같이 했다고 하는데, 거기에 그 외국인 유학생들이 혹시 또 있는 거를 좀 보신 적이 있는가 이제 그런 것이 궁금합니다. 왜냐하면 이게 잘 되면 저희도 이제 우프 같이 서로 연대를 해서 다른 나라의 길을 같이 이렇게 만들어주고 구축할 수 있지 않을까 이런 생각이 들어서 여쭤보는 겁니다.
非常感谢你的问题。刚刚我有查了一下，我有发现这个组织，我想应该有很多很相近的地方，因为会参与做手作步道的这些群众，他们也常常会去农场，会去参与一些劳动的工作。目前在台湾，这个来参加手作步道的有蛮多是来自欧洲跟美国的志工，那还有日本跟香港，我们非常期待韩国的学生一起来参与我们。我们将来也会让台湾的学生有机会，如果韩国这边有的话，我们也会邀请台湾的学生来韩国这边参与。谢谢。
네, 또 혹시 네. 질문이 있으신가요? 가열차게 질문해 주세요.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 국립산림과학원에서 지금 에녹글리든 씨에게 발표하고자 합니다. 산림과학원에서 숲길연구학원의 류도현이라고 합니다. 발표 잘 들었습니다. 네, 에녹글리든 씨의 그 가능성에 눈을 썼다는 말이 굉장히 멋지게 들렸습니다. 그래서 발표를 듣는 와중에 인스타그램 팔로우를 할 정도로 굉장히 감명 깊게 들었었는데 저는 그 가능성을 발견하지 못한 자들에 대해서 질문을 하고자 합니다. 그 가능성을 발견을 하지 못한 사람들까지 공공장소를 이용할 수 있게 하는 게 어떤 목표인 것처럼 저는 받아들여졌는데 그런 환경을 조성하는 것 외적으로 사회나 거버넌스 그리고 정책적으로 이제 사회가 기여할 수 있는 방안 그리고 직접 피부로 느낀 제안과 그런 개선 사항들 그런 부분에 대해서 제일 중요하게 생각한 한두 가지 정도 좀 제안을 듣고자 합니다.
Yeah, thank you for your question and thank you for your compliments. In the United States, we have adaptive sports organizations that allow people with disabilities to have access to the equipment that allows them to do all of these activities. So if you could start an organization here that would allow people to have access to that equipment, that would really open up a lot more opportunities for people because that equipment can be very expensive. So having access to the things that allow people to do these things really does open up a world of opportunities for people. That would be the big one. The other things, just having volunteer groups that can take people out to places and give them rides to places and give them the assistance that they need to be able to do things. Even just giving someone a push on a trail is a great way to allow people to get out and enjoy nature and be able to do things that they might not be able to do without that help. So just having people to assist is a great way to get people out.
네, 감사합니다. 혹시 또 한 분만 더, 네.
네, 저는 두 분 모두에게 좀 질문 드리고 싶은데요. 그 대한민국도 그 이제 대만과 마찬가지로 그 좀 되게 산이 높고 험하기로 좀 유명한데 그래서 우리나라에도 이 무장애 숲길이라고 이 장애인들이 쉽게 접근할 수 있도록 숲길을 조성해 놓은 것이 있습니다. 근데 대부분 이제 데크로만 이제 빽빽하게 조성이 되어 있어서 조금 경관이 좀 단조롭거나 비슷한 경향이 있는데 이게 좀 어떻게 생각하시는지 듣고 싶고요. 또한 뭔가 자연 친화적인 경관을 이제 내주면서 접근성을 높일 수 있는 방법이 있다면 설계 조성 방법이 있다면 좀 말씀을 듣고 싶습니다. 네, 두 분 다 좀 어떻게 생각하시는지 듣고 싶어요. 일단 그 목재 데크로만 조성된 그런 무장애 숲길에 관해서.
네, 서명겸 대표님 먼저 말씀해 주시겠어요?
我觉得这个问题很好，因为在台湾我们也遇到类似的挑战，就是但是这个可以透过步道的分类分级。我看到昨天我去智异山的时候，我看到韩国的步道有分成5级。那我们这个分级的背后，通常考虑了环境的敏感程度，然后还有坡度等等。因此，如果在第1级的或第2级的步道，我记得因为这个美国的专家在这里，我记得美国有一个无障碍的4个原则就是在不破坏自然的前提之下，应该要提供这个所有的人亲近自然的权利，这是一种权利。那所以其实在美国我看过是美国跟日本都有针对行动不便的人有一些公法手册，那它就是会透过前面的步道的选择，然后在不破坏自然的前提之下，有一些路段其实是可以透过，不一定是要用栈道。我刚刚那个案例是没有办法一定要用栈道，我们也有其他的案例是透过步道的路线的选择，比方说在应该也是美国有一个那个永续步道准则。永续步道准则的发起是为了那个 mountain bike， 是因为要给单车使用，但是它的坡度控制、排水还有夯实的程度，其实它某种程度来说，那个选线也是可以让行动不便的人使用，可以进行参考的。所以我想这个分类分级，在不破坏自然的条件之下，提供所有人亲近自然的权利，这是做得到的。
My answer would be somewhat similar, but I would start with trails that are already close to being accessible, and then maybe removing the smaller barriers that make it not accessible, and not necessarily building new trails, but improving the trails that already exist, because they're already not impacting the environment because they've already been built. And so improving those trails and then removing rocks and roots and the things that make it more difficult would go a long way toward making those trails more open to people, but also not destroying the environment further.
네, 감사합니다. 생각과 마음의 넓이와 깊이를 키운 시간이었던 것 같습니다. 자, 다음 세션 전에 잠시 또 휴식을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 15분 휴식하시고, 네, 15분 후에 이 자리에서 뵙겠습니다. 와우. 네.